Hello and welcome, Wellness Fam, to another episode of Dungeons and Wellness. Woo! I am Michelle, your DM, and joining me, just like last time, we have Kim.
Hello.
Hi, Kim. Welcome
Hey,
back.
Michelle. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for being here. And speaking of Michelle, we also have Michelle.
Hello.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us again.
Yeah.
We, of course, also have Steve.
Hello.
Yay. Welcome back, Steve. Thank you for being here. So, beautiful adventurers, thank you so much for joining me again today for our very first Clarity episode.
Woo.
Woo.
Yes. So, for those of you who are like, what's a Clarity episode? Just like it said down below, go and check out our first play episode. Here on Dungeons and Wellness, our whole thing is that we have pairs of episodes and we jump back and forth. So every other episode is a play episode where we play through a narrative for about an hour, maybe plus or minus 15 minutes. Then every alternating episode, which isn't a play episode, is what we call a clarity episode, where we break down what happened in the play episode and we talk about different lessons in mental health and mental wellness that we can take from our tabletop D&D experience and then carry into our regular everyday lives, IRL. Gamer lingo. Yes, welcome to my life. Thank you to the DNW fam for putting up with me and all my dorkiness. Okay, so guys, there was a lot that happened during our first play episode, and I'm really excited to unpack some of those things with you today. So first of all, round of applause to you and just amazing job adventuring. A lot of weird and funny things happened that I honestly did not expect. But I guess what's new in the world of D&D, right? So we can kick things off by watching a quick little replay. So pretty early on in our play episode, we had a moment where our adventurers Rand, Caesar, and Nifty had shown up in a barn. And as they descended into, or as they proceeded into the depths of the barn, they came across an interesting scene. There was a group of people being spoken to by their village speaker when all of a sudden there was a crash of thunder and lightning. Can we get our first clip, please? Suddenly, you hear loud crash of thunder. Lightning streaks through the barn. Well, not the lightning itself, the illumination from the lightning. The illumination streaks through the barn, and the sound of rolling thunder booms through the walls, shaking dust from the rafters. You notice one of the townsfolk seems extremely disturbed?
I'll go over and I'll ask him what's the matter? What's going on?
The thunder, it's scary. I can't do it.
Can't do what?
I can't stay here. Sir, excuse me. Can I like go to the bathroom or something?
You know how these community meetings work. Once you are here, you stay here the whole time.
Do I see
You
my
can't
parents
miss
here?
anything. Oh boy. All right. So that was a scene that really stuck out to me. And I wanted to pull that out because I thought there was a lot to unpack there. So we had the crash of thunder and lightning. And Steve, I wanted to say, I loved how, like, as soon as I said, oh, you notice one person seems a little upset, your first instinct was to go over and ask, hey, how you doing? You okay?
Mhm.
I really feel like, do you think that instinct to ask to help, do you think that's something that has always come to you naturally? Or do you think that's something that kind of ties into your experience as an EMT, maybe? I'm just curious.
Well, they say that the characters are extensions of ourselves. So I've always had this altruistic streak in me. As paid EMT, volunteer EMT, going back to grad school for mental health. So yeah, I mean, every character I play, for the most part, they would have that same type of helping, altruistic streak as well. So yeah, that's natural for my character to, if that happened in real life, I would do the same thing. So it's natural for my character to just, it just comes out that way.
Oh, that
I can't
totally
really
makes
play a character that would just be. I mean, even though my characters are labeled neutral, I'm not really playing them neutral. It's more of like a lawful neutral or neutral good.
Mm-hmm.
A neutral character would just probably glance over and think it's got nothing to do with me.
Right, that's true. And
I've
actually,
always
that's
played my characters.
So actually, there was a little bit like going through the whole episode, right? Steve's character, it's implied that he actually has a good family, like good parenting. So a lot of that could also come from just good parenting. So from just teaching his character the right way to react when somebody is in trouble.
Well, in real life, it came from good parenting. So I guess, yeah.
There you go.
In the fantasy world, it would follow suit.
Yeah.
There you go. The connection between the player and the character. And, I really just wanted to start off by saying, like, that streak or that kind of impulse of wanting to help, wherever it comes from, like wherever we learned it from as we go through life, that is actually something that I recognized in everybody who's here on this Dungeons and Wellness team. And just like through getting to know all of you, I recognized like that helper impulse, the desire to like spread goodness and light and love and that sort of energy into the world. And so that's part of the reason why I invited all of you to be on this project in the first place. And I think it's like so cool to think that in this world, you just never know who has that healer's instinct, that instinct to want to help however we can. So this is something I do want to come back to later on, but we'll also talk about how we can help each other, how we can all help each other in different ways, even if we don't necessarily have that formal clinical training, even if you aren't currently in a master's of mental health counseling like Steve is, you can still learn how to help people around you, and different ways to be part of a supportive community.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what a little plug I wanted to get in there. We can all
I
help
so
each other.
desperately want to be an evil character, but I can't do it.
Well, then that's when we get into the really deep stuff.
Oh,
Where is
yeah.
all that evil
That's
coming from?
going sure.
See, that's where the excitement comes from, though. The evil characters. I think I
So-
played 2. Oh wait, no, there's one. Oh, in Michelle's campaign. The other.
Oh
Michelle.
yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
He just turned evil.
My evil
true.
character would be in the black cloak, all
No,
shady and like tall and menacing, and be like, "Can I help you with something?"
it's so great though.
I can't do it. No.
There's something to be said about like being nice in the real world and then being able to do dark things in the fantasy world.
It's so true. It's because you want to embody that different character than what you were, kind of raised to be.
Mhm.
But
yeah.
bringing it back to that first clip, I
will
also
say
want to
this.
mention.
My favorite character in Star Wars is Darth Vader, and I always rooted for the Empire. But there's some dichotomy there. I need to transfer that to D&D.
Wow.
Kimberly's like, "Wow, you need to come and speak to me soon." And
No, I'm just chuckling because I purposefully was excited to wear a Darth Vader shirt today.
Nice.
There he is, the guy. So yeah. But Steve, I actually love that you bring that up, because Star Wars, for example, is an instance of where people started to really think about that dichotomy of good versus evil in human nature, and how it can involve layers of complexity, and how we can bring in more nuance into that conversation of, is this person good? Is this person evil? Maybe there's a story behind that evil. So R.I.P. Anakin. But anyways, to go back to Dungeons and Wellness, though, when we had that epic crash of thunder and lightning, Kim, I was curious I would love to talk a little bit about your character's reaction to the thunder and lightning. So initially, like when the thunder and lightning happened, I noticed that your character reaction was basically just like, "Oh, I can't." And those were some of the first words out of your mouth. Like, I can't.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can't deal with it. He was
Just
getting
feeling-
triggered, and it's a very exaggerated form of it, I would say. It feels, the reaction comes from, it sounds like it came from, no, the actual trauma was like recent. It's more of like an acute stress rather than PTSD. So for those of you viewers who don't know the difference between acute stress versus PTSD, right? Acute stress is a 1 month time period from when the trauma happened, and then past a month, it's PTSD. So it's the timeline thing. So yeah, so it sounds like I forgot his name. Drake. Gosh, how can I forget his name? Drake of the Rake has recently experienced the stressor. So
it's acute with him.
yeah.
And I mean, the forms of trigger can be more than just physical representations of it, correct? Or yeah. It's not just how Drake was reacting to the thunder. It can form in many different ways.
Yeah, you're right, Michelle. It's also possible that everything around him was triggering, and the lightning was basically the straw that broke the camel's back. So it could be the group, like just gathering in this culty thing. It could be the barn in general. That's just reigniting the whole thing for him.
And maybe he was getting some flashbacks. We don't know,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah, I definitely do think that in traumatic experience and in stress, like stressful situations, it's definitely important to keep track of like that feeling of overwhelm, because people definitely do. We all have our kind of limits of how much we can process and how much we can manage at any given time.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone has a different limit, and that's based on, you know, your life, your conditioning, what you've been through on your own. But I think that a big part of wellness is being self-aware to the point where you can start to learn when you're starting to reach your own limit, and starting to try to be aware of when you are starting to get overwhelmed. So that, yeah, if you're familiar with that, then you can say, oh, okay, this is getting to be a bit much. I'm gonna, you know, do my self-care things. I'm gonna separate myself from the situation.
Yeah, that is one way to deal with the trauma. Is to be more aware, to gain insight. We therapists call it insight on the situation. So the situation at hand, and then the thoughts that are coming through your head, the feelings that are linked with it, and then the behavior that comes with it. So that's the trifecta of the things
Wow.
that constitute some reaction, right? Another thing is paying attention to your bodily sensations. So if you're not aware that you're getting triggered, paying attention to your sensations help. Your body sensations, racing heart and things like that.
Yeah, and you also have to recognize that all those physiological symptoms, that's your adrenaline kicking in, your fight or flight
right,
stimulations coming in. So when you're having a panic attack, I mean, and you have those physical symptoms, if you know that that's where it's coming from, then maybe it could help you. I don't know if that's true, Kim. If you know where it's coming from, it could help you, you know, to do your breathing exercises or the focus anti-anxiety exercises, like focus on 5 things in the room that you can see, or things you can touch, that sort of thing. If you know where it's coming from.
So
realize you're not losing your mind. It's just you're reacting to a physiological response.
Yeah.
Or adrenaline.
So the responses or the sensations are kind of like the signs that you're getting triggered. And then the things that you were talking about, Steve, were the coping skills, right? It's really important for us to know our coping skills, to know how we can calm ourselves, things like that. But it's also important for us to know what's going on, right? The 3 things, the who, the what, and the where. So who are you with? What is happening around you, or what are you doing, and where are you? Like, those 3 things are important for you to know why you're getting triggered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you can orient yourself like that, then yeah, I think it would help go a long way to help you figure out why you're getting triggered. What's causing that?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And
so Drake of the Rake, you know, if he can figure that out, maybe we can go back, you know.
I don't think he knows.
Do a backstory.
66 and he
figure
doesn't
it out.
know. Poor Drake. But yeah, I couldn't agree more. I love the idea of just like, you know, building that insight, building that awareness, and knowing that it's not you, you know, like all these thoughts, Steve, like you were saying, I'm not losing my mind. Like, this is the anxiety speaking. This is the trauma speaking. This is the, and being able to separate that from like yourself. I think that's such a huge part of
I'd like to think that his rake is his defense mechanism. He carries it with him wherever he goes, whether he needs it or not, whether he's using it or not. It's just that's it. It's the rake.
Oh, I love it.
I love it.
Yeah. Oh, I'm gonna make
like
it the
it's-
truth. That is what
Right.
is happening.
It's his little comfort item.
Yeah, support blanket, something. Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, his comfort rake.
Mm,
I love that.
Drake
It could be magical rake, like a +2 rake of mental healing.
+2 in his
right.
charisma.
Oh,
Exactly.
I love that.
Or maybe Drake is the victim of a psionic attack by, maybe he was an adventurer at one point. And he killed a vampire long ago, and now the vampire's mate is coming back and to curse him psionically, and that's why he panics. And this rake has been imbued with magical qualities to help.
I mean, he is 66. He's had like his whole life.
Yeah, exactly.
So I mean, he could have adventured before.
It would be crazy if that's what ends up, like, if that's exactly how Kim ends up playing Drake, and it turns out what you just said is like a huge spoiler for the rest of the season. We don't have any of this planned, by the way, for members of the audience. So if that's what happens, then what a coincidence. Wow.
Well, he was made up after like 5 minutes before the actual streaming. So there you go.
Oh yeah. This I guess we can, or I'll let the audience know, by the way.
Sorry.
Our goal here, of course, our goal here is not to be like, perfect and polished and blah 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 blah. We want you all to know that we are just very real, regular folks, just like all of you at home watching. None of us are perfect. And so we're all just kind of goofy. We're doing our own thing, being silly, having fun. And so, just kind of, we're just here to chill. So I do think that's important to say, because I don't have the expectation of perfection for myself or anyone around me. And that's something that I've been working on recently. Yay, we all have our journeys.
Yay.
So
I have some thoughts on Farmer Krennic. If you had any clips of him doing his speech.
Ooh, I don't think we pulled clips of him doing his speech, but Farmer Krennic was he was very intense for the audience members. If you haven't seen that yet, essentially he was giving this speech where he was saying, the outsiders, they only want to hurt us. We can't trust them. We have to be afraid of the outsiders. It's very like a divisive, polarizing type of speech.
So I thought his speech, it was very, it was very ethnocentric. I mean, he was attacking everybody on the outside, and he was being very insular with the people of Daenerys. And I was thinking, what could have caused that? Obviously, a trauma, but what could that have been?
I was gonna say it probably is from trauma. Yeah.
And going a step further, if they had actual mental health in the D&D world, say he went to a wizard who specialized in this sort of thing, what modality could be used to help him? Like I was thinking maybe like cognitive behavioral therapy. Would that be used to help him? Because obviously his thoughts are dictating his actions, and his thoughts are going back to his trauma, whatever that is about the town and Daenerys being the light and everything else is. Maybe he shuns magic. Maybe somebody from the town, a relative, a good friend was killed in the outside world, and he's just become traumatized by that.
Well,
maybe he's an ex-adventurer too, and he settled on Daenerys, and he's just saw too much bad stuff go down in the outside world. He might have played some classic modules, and maybe gotten traumatized by this stuff. Maybe all his adventuring party was killed.
It could have been that, or it could have been what he was taught. So it could have been from his own experiences, in which case it would be CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. If it was his childhood and what he was taught, I would go for like psychodynamic.
Mm-hmm.
So that's more of understanding the patterns in what you were taught, like in the past, the patterns of what your oh my gosh, I'm blanking out right now. I suck. No,
Like, that's fine.
Your
Your
not parents,
conditioning.
but your
what you've learned.
primary caregiver. There you
Mhm.
go. Your primary caregiver. It could be your parents. It could be a guardian of some sort that taught you the way of the world, right? Way of the land, and that was their belief, and that's what was developed.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually really love that, Steve, that you brought that up because there is, I think, just as long as society has existed as a concept, I think there's always been some level of that kind of divisive in-group versus out-group sentiment. And that whole like us versus them, this sentiment of separation, I think that originally that started out as like a protective thing where it's like, oh, it's a bunch of us humans living on the savannah and there are lions walking around. So we band together and so there's power in numbers and we protect ourselves from what's on the outside. Now, well, I would say the majority of humans are not walking around with wild lions. And so we don't have to worry about the same level of scary things on the outside world. But our brains kind of have that programming from back in the day when we first evolved as a species. So it's interesting to see how our brains kind of, when we don't feel safe, there's something in the outside world that makes us feel like, oh no, like we have to go into survival mode. A lot of the time, our brains will jump into that, like, oh, keep us safe by being insular and by separating from the outside. And that's what'll keep us safe. And so I think that in exploring the reasons of why Chronic is like this and how he became like this, that's also a good way to start to try to understand like those around us who maybe at like initially at face value might say like, oh no, like I don't want to talk to you, like you're different from me. And maybe maybe we can try to start to understand like, okay, but where did this come from? Why is this like this?
Actually, Michelle, to bring that up, the us versus them, the them part.
Yeah.
I would also say the more appropriate form of therapy here is a community-based one, just because it's not just Father Cranach. It's also his followers that believed him immediately, right? And so it's more of a systemic thing rather than just him. Because if it was just him, then, well, it's an individual thing. Yeah. So community, like a broader scale type interventions would be appropriate in this world.
That would be group therapy.
A broader group therapy.
Yeah.
A macro group therapy type of thing. 100 people in the room.
Well, it's more of like things that can be implemented for a community. Yeah.
Oh, right. So just like from the level of I guess like societal infrastructure, how can you support communities so that those who don't feel safe can feel more safe?
Yeah, pretty much.
Because I guess like the main thing about a trigger is that like it reminds you of something where safety was an issue.
Yeah.
And a big part of trauma is just not feeling safe in the first place.
Yeah.
And so maybe a big part of the wellness journey is also learning to recognize like, what is it that can help us to feel more safe? And how can we help more people and those around us to feel safe as well? Maybe that's a big part of the journey.
Mhm.
That whole us and them philosophy, that's what permeated every bit of our society.
Mhm.
You could trace it back to D&D when I first started playing when I was a kid in the 80s. The us and them thing, you had because back then high school was so diverse with all its different little groups, or diverse but at the same time very insulated, because the jocks only hung out with the jocks, the metalheads, the nerds like us played D&D. Everybody shunned us because we were them, because we were playing something, because we were into something that nobody understood.
Mhm.
That was an excellent philosophy. How interesting now it's all going completely the other way, that so many people are playing this game or games in
Thanks to
general.
5e. It just
Oh,
got
yeah.
more accessible with 5e.
Yeah.
And it's totally accessible too. And let's face it, the rules are a little simpler for 5e than they were when I played. They make
Yeah.
things very, very inviting as far as the characterizations and the modifications and whatnot. So it's not really an us and them thing anymore.
Yeah. And something that I also wanted to bring up, and I know we should probably play the next clip anyway, but I feel like it's also part recognizing social cues as well. So when Steve's character was like, "Are you okay?" Yes, because of maybe his upbringing and the way he was taught to say, hey, if he recognizes someone that is in pain or is having some sort of issue, you would go out of your way to say what's wrong. But maybe some people don't have that specific social cue taught to them. So that's just like, we have to be cognizant that not everyone was taught that way or doesn't have the cognitive ability to recognize those.
And some people are just plain selfish.
Yeah.
Well, that also could be part of the community intervention, is to educate the public about what's proper. The social cues that are missing. Which actually, Steve's character lives in this community. Are you sheltered? Like, do you not know any of the I don't know, bigotry or something that's been happening?
The bigotry was a total surprise to me that night, because we had actually planned to do something else. But the bigotry, Michelle being a good DM, she threw some unexpected stuff in there. So
keep you on your toes.
So we could say that, he was sheltered from the bigotry, or maybe his parents told him, or maybe he heard of it, but he's a farm boy. He just does his farm thing for 12 hours a day. Doesn't really go into town. Hangs out with his family. The only concern he has with Krennic is like trying to date his daughter, like I said, and or maybe he doesn't understand what the bigotry is all about. He's just a simple farm boy, like Luke Skywalker. Like, what are you talking about? Like I don't know what you're talking about. The light and all this sort of thing. I gotta get up and pick the corn tomorrow.
Right, exactly. I have important things on my mind, like kissing Morgan.
He's not gonna worry about these things.
That's true.
Right. It's so interesting, just like sitting here talking with you guys about this, like really makes me think about how much like systems thinking is incorporated into like every aspect of our lives. Like even with these characters, like how much are they in their systems versus like how much are they removed from that? What does Rand know about his own learning in life and where it comes from? And actually,
maybe his parents are ex-adventurers too. Maybe they're former non-practicing wizards, and every night they put like a forgetfulness spell on him, so he doesn't remember the bigotry that he's heard. He wakes up the next morning an innocent teenager.
Okay, they're no longer good.
Just modify memory.
Oh god,
5 minutes. Modify memory.
That's another messed up thing altogether. Another clarity episode.
Yes.
Every night, the minute he sits down and takes his first bit of food, what?
What happened?
What's the matter? Oh, nothing, Pa. Nothing, Pa.
Oh no.
Oh, we can talk about over sheltering your kids for 2 seasons.
God,
I have a lot to say about that.
Dark.
Yeah, wow.
I wish somebody could do that to me every night, please.
Oh my god.
Do it.
Oh, this human experience, man. But actually, speaking of like just communal support, we had a couple of pretty good examples during our episode of ways that you can helpfully support people around you versus like, maybe you have good intentions, but the execution is not so great. So sometimes people will ask their friends for support if they're not feeling good. But sometimes your friends are not the most well-equipped to provide you with the support that you need. So on that note, I'd like to play clip number 4.
Yeah, I'm down. I don't know how one starts adventuring. I don't know where to go, but I'm up for it.
And Soup looks at you and says, "You just go."
Yeah. Thanks, Soup.
Well, so guys, why don't we let's go to Waterdeep.
Sounds like a great idea.
That's brilliant.
It does sound like a great
Good,
idea.
man. That's brilliant.
Yeah. So in that situation, Caesar, so I felt like Caesar was genuinely trying to, help himself grow. He was like, "Oh, okay, well, I'd be interested in adventuring. I just don't know how." And like, I feel like that's so relatable for me personally. Like, all right, I'm down to step out of my comfort zone. Just like, how do I start? So Soup gave some very unhelpful advice to Caesar. You just do it.
Unhelpful?
I would say that's not too helpful. I don't know, Steve, maybe that's helpful for other people.
Maybe that's how Soup did it.
True.
Well,
Yeah,
I
Kim.
mean, to me, it's unhelpful. It's unhelpful because it technically invalidated the concern that was brought to the table. Like, oh, I don't know. There's that ambivalence, right? So generally, when someone is ambivalent, the key to change, stages of change, is to ride with the ambivalence, is to facilitate the change. Because if you tell someone to do something, your chances of success is not really great. Like you can't just say, "Oh, go do it," and somebody will be like, "Oh yeah, sure, that's a great idea. I'll go do it. Thanks for the advice." That's not how life works.
Right. Okay.
So it's more of, okay, on the one hand, you're not sure, maybe there's a lot of traps in the area, or on the other hand, you want to grow. Like pointing out those two.
Definitely.
The buzzword is called motivational interviewing. That's
Good
basically,
stuff.
if you want to research on that, that's
Yeah.
basically the skill that I'm alluding to. It's facilitating change.
Wow.
Stages of change. Writing someone through that. Taking someone through that, writing someone.
Motivational interviewing.
Yeah.
So it's basically just explaining a process, right? You don't just do the thing. You have to be like, okay, in order to start adventuring, you gotta gear up, you gotta shop for your weapons, your items, just make sure you have all your health potions, right? And then do you have any, combat ability at all? You should probably learn how to do that before you start, adventuring out into the wilderness. But I mean, like in any case, in any sort of, life skill that you want to learn, it's a process. You don't just go from A to B and expect to be an expert like the next day.
But I think in the context of where Soup was coming from, and his character was so brilliant because he's obviously traumatized and jaded. If you look at the scars on all of them, so he wouldn't maybe 10 years ago, he would have the patience to sit there and say, well, kid, can you fight with a sword?
Mm.
And do all that, how much gold you got on you? Do you know where you know the map of the world? You can't go off by yourself. But now he's so jaded and traumatized that, and looking around, and probably can't put his back to to the door or anything like that. So just from the context of his character coming out and saying, hey, just do it. Like, leave me alone. Put the wall up. Just do it.
Right.
I agree with what you're saying, Michelle, but Kimberly and Michelle, but just like in the context of his character, so I feel was so brilliant because he's sitting there, like I imagine him, like you said, dark cloaked, sitting in the corner, drinking his ale. Just do it, like that. That looks so cool on a movie scene. Like, oh wow. And so then you have the I'm not gonna say the young elves, because no elves are young, but you see like Caesar saying like, wow, okay, just do it, man, do it.
Yeah, I guess a
An
big
experience of not knowing that, it's probably not the best advice in the world to give me.
Yeah. That's actually a super interesting point, because I will say, like, in my past, there have been times when like I would ask like elders in my community for like life advice and things, and I would receive just like the whole spectrum. Like, some people would be like, oh, you want to be happy? Well, you can already be happy. You're the only one in your own way. Just let yourself be happy. And I'd be like, what does that mean? And then I would also get people who would say like, oh, it'll take time, and like just baby steps. And so I would hear all types of different advice. And it was interesting because ultimately I felt like the people gave me advice that worked the best for them. And so I think that we have this natural tendency to advise people to do what works for us because it was successful in our experience. But then there's also that important aspect of knowing who you're talking to, I guess knowing your audience. And like if Soup and Caesar had like a closer relationship, if they knew each other better, maybe they would have had a conversation, or I don't know what would have happened. But you're right, like Steve, as it was, Soup kind of existed within their own background of trauma. And so they said, listen, I don't know about you, but for me, at the end of the day,
if they had a close relationship, I mean, maybe they could sit by the fire and Soup would be like, see all these scars? I don't sleep at night, kid. See this eye? Doesn't work properly. And go over all his trauma, everything that happened to him on all his adventures, all the nightmares he has and everything. He's like, is that what you want? Caesar would have to weigh in that,
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Oh,
things get really dark.
You missed your calling as like a Hollywood actor.
No, I don't want that. No. Introverts don't do that. No.
But yeah, just in terms of like knowing the person who is asking for help, knowing what kind of help is best for them, it's so huge, I think.
There's something else that happened in the bar I thought was interesting. When the bartender is being a jerk to Nifty and not getting her drink, and Rand, naturally wanted to stand up for his friend, I guess being a gentleman, and maybe the bartender's being a little a little misogynistic. He said, hey, get the girl her drink. And then Nifty turned around and said, oh, I could have gotten it myself. So Rand was like, oh, okay, fine. So he didn't understand that. So that's interesting. So why would Nifty say that? Was there some trauma there? Or some
We'll
kind
never
of
know.
there?
Oh my gosh, I love that. Just in terms tying this. Oh, also, like, Michelle, sorry, you can respond first. I just am so excited.
Oh, no, go ahead.
But
I'm very interested how you interpret my character.
Yeah. First of all, your character was friggin' adorable, like a little fish in a backpack. Oh my gosh. um, I love the whole tie-in to like misogyny because I feel like within just this one play episode and this conversation, we've realized that there are a lot of systemic sources of trauma that have affected all of these characters individually and collectively. So Farmer Chronic and all of his followers, they've been, or I guess he has had his trauma, and then he's inculcated his followers into this culture of like fear and kind of like polarizing divisiveness. Then we have Soup, who comes from like his own war and battle related trauma, and like everyone is acting in their own, from their own lens of their experience and their own traumatic history. And so in that little interaction between Rand and Nifty, when like, you know, Rand, he has that helping impulse, like we were saying earlier. He wanted to help Drake of House Rake with the trigger experience. And now Rand wants to step in and help Nifty because he sees that Nifty is also struggling. And in that moment, like when Nifty says, like, I could have done it myself. And Michelle, I don't know what was going through your head, but in my experience, I feel like I've seen that scene play out a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've seen like in society moments when, for example, like I'll see a guy who just genuinely just wants to help and will, for instance, like hold a door open for a woman who's walking behind him.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll see like I'll see sometimes the woman will react kind of like in a defensive way and say like, oh, I could have done that. And so in those moments, I feel like there's so much more behind those actions. There's so much more than just that one little moment between those people.
So you've seen that. That's happened to me.
Yeah. Yes, I'm sure it has. Yeah,
So at this point, we're assuming that Nifty has been traveling with Caesar and Rand for quite a while. But I think it's still recent enough that Caesar and Rand don't know everything there is to know about Nifty. And given that Nifty is a halfling,
nifty character.
Yeah. Given that Nifty is a halfling, has that height disadvantage, has that, and is also, in this case, a woman, there's a lot of things stacked against that. And there's a lot of societal transgressions that happen when you are both, you know, of a marginally sized group and a woman. And I don't know if we have the time to even talk about that subject, but
we'll make time in a future episode.
Yeah. So it was just all stacked against her, and sure, there could be some other underlying thing going on with Nifty, and you could have, you know, that could have been just a bad day for her. It just all comes into how she reacted of, you know what, I just wanted to figure it out myself. That sort of mentality.
I think, Michelle, you portrayed that really accurately and relatably. Relatably? I don't know. As, you know, everything is stacked against her. You said it yourself, right? And it's difficult for people like Rand to understand that because they're not in the same situation. Especially
and he's sheltered, so he probably wouldn't understand that anyway.
Oh yeah, he's super sheltered, and it's that helping reflex also that comes back to bite him. And I predict that it will come back to bite him in future episodes as well.
Oh, I guarantee it.
Because people want to help. People who are good in general want to help others. Sometimes that's not what people need. Right? Sometimes they need to just be listened to. Right? So if somebody was just like, like talk to Nifty or something, right? Talk to Nifty about what happened and how she felt about that. It might have gone over differently versus, oh, let me solve this problem for you. You know, it's a different ball game.
Right.
Yeah.
And I guess, like, also, Michelle, what you said about all of these different pieces that are playing into Nifty's backstory reminds me of just the intersectionality of all of our identities.
Yeah.
Everybody has so many different parts that make us who we are. And so Nifty is part of many different societal groups that all kind of get looked down on, literally and figuratively. And so maybe Nifty has more of a history of being mistreated. Just in general, Nifty is mistreated more often than the average member of society. And so maybe Nifty has like a biased perspective where she looks at something that has like a neutral intention, but is more likely to see it as like a demeaning thing or like an attacking thing, because she's just more used to that. And she's conditioned to think that, yeah, like attacks are inevitable. I'm going to be attacked by society in some way.
Well, also within the group, I mean, she's with Caesar and Rand, right? She's a token. Like there's three, a group of three. She's the only girl. She's the shortest one. Both of them are tall. One of them's an elf, right? The other one is what, a human? Rand, are you human? Okay. Who's generally, I'm envisioning you to be tall.
Yeah, I would say.
Yeah.
About 6
tall.
feet, probably.
So Nifty has complexes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, in the old system of D&D, I mean, hobbits, halflings, they were kind of marginalized because of their size, but also they were designed back then to make perfect thief characters, and they had their own like racial advantages to doing that. And I mean, the rules now are very different. I mean, there are no more really thieving skills rules, and not even called thieves anymore. They're rogues, which a rogue could be like, you know, a lovable rogue like Han Solo. But it's interesting, in a way, they still are marginalized because of their size anyway. As always, I think that, you know, since it happens in real society and fantasy society, that would probably be the case as well.
And that's...
And mostly also because halflings tend to come from rustic backgrounds. So people look down on them like, oh, you know, like you're not educated or you're not, you know, you're not properly trained, this or that. You come from like, you know, you live in a hole in the ground, like Tolkien's Hobbit. And that's, you know, that's marginalization too.
And that's generally what Tasha's Cauldron of Everything is trying to erase, right? Like before the stuff that happened there, or the new rules, certain races are good for certain things.
Yeah.
So they're specifically defined to be good at something. I mean, like, what is it? A Leonin from the Greek thing,
Odyssey. Yeah,
Odyssey.
Yeah.
That you won't see a Leonin that's a wizard because they're primarily for strength. But what if you want a lion that wants to be a wizard, you know? And with Tasha's, you specific, like it changes that, right? You can do that already because the ability scores are anything you want it.
Well, they're much more open-minded, just open now to who could be a character, who could not. I love the fact that orcs can be paladins.
Yeah.
I think that's cool because back in the day, like, you know, I'd have to dig it out. Or not dig it out. I have my books in the other room to show you that. In like the original Player's Handbook, when I was a kid, it said that elves couldn't be rangers. And I thought that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. They're born, like, if you have a wood elf born in the woods, they'd be a perfect ranger. They should have all these advantages. So I still have it in the book where actually it's on a chart, you know, like race, character, class, and elf, ranger. No, and I crossed it out as a kid in big red ink, and I wrote, yes. No, I'm going against it. It's ridiculous. It's silly.
Wait, I didn't know that was a thing. They actually like prohibited you to be a specific thing?
Yeah, back then. Yeah, we're talking about the original Player's Handbook from the early '80s, and that lasted throughout the '80s.
Wow.
And I don't remember. I never really gotten this. I played second edition, but I never got any of the books. I didn't DM it. I didn't care for the system. I don't know if that continued to be a thing, but that was a major issue I had with the game back then. And the DM that I played with, who I still play with today, like, he's a stickler to the rules. And we would clash over that because I would make up an oath ranger. No, you can't do that. The book says you can't. Oh, mine says it can. But it's not. No. You can't just write in yes.
Ooh.
So they're very open-minded now as to who can be what.
Yes.
I mean, Tiefling, in Supernatural 28 played Tiefling cleric. Tieflings have an infernal background. They look like demons, but why can't they be lawful? Why can't they worship good deities?
I love that. And so I kind of really enjoy that within the fantasy world of D&D, people are starting to understand that like race, class, like any race can be any class, and like really you can build a character however you want them to be. And like you could play a goblin who is good. Yeah. Why not, man? And
I played with goblin characters. They're funny.
Yeah. And so like the limitations that existed in terms of separating races into different classes, I think those limitations at the end of the day really only existed in the minds of the people who created the D&D world.
Well, they had to grow too because it was getting old.
Right. And so, for example, you, like when you were playing D&D, you kind of had a mindset that had progressed beyond that. And so you were like, no, I don't want to.
I mean, to a certain extent. I mean, like you have to understand D&D took a lot of stuff from the Lord of the Rings, from Tolkien, which I didn't know until I read the Lord of the Rings, and I realized, oh yeah, I always thought that, I remember reading Lord of the Rings the first time thinking, oh, this is a lot like D&D. I was 14. and then realizing, oh no, D&D is like this. So, in Tolkien's work, the orcs were evil creatures, irredeemable. They were elves that were tortured and by the first Dark Lord Melkor and turned into these evil things. There's no redeeming them. So that's where D&D got their stuff from, and other fantasy authors at the time too. Conan the Barbarian stuff. So that's where they were coming from that classic fantasy, that goblins, orcs, they're evil creatures.
Right. Yeah.
So that's where they got it from, and that's the mindset that they started off with, and that was the mindset of the 70s, 80s, 90s. If you suggested back then, like what they're doing now, people were like, no, you can't do that. That's stupid. An orc is an orc. An orc can't be a paladin. Paladin is a holy figure. Orcs are evil creatures.
Right.
They had to grow because it was getting stale. It was getting old.
Yeah. So
that's where they were coming from back then. So, and yeah, I was coming from that totally because as a kid, I didn't know any. When you're a kid, you're not really thinking about growing beyond that. But, the elf thing pissed me off. So that's why I did that.
Yeah. And so you started to recognize, like, we don't need those limitations.
Yeah,
we can move beyond that. We can take away that limit. Like if an elf wants to be a ranger, let them be a ranger. If a tiefling wants to be a cleric, let them be a cleric.
And taking away those limitations is a very smart business move. And that's why 5e is one of the reasons 5e has been so incredibly successful. Yeah. Think about it.
It's a business move.
No, you're totally right, man.
They sit there like, guys, how can we grow? We're going to do this, this, and this.
Let's be open.
Yeah.
Make all different types of playing with the steampunk and like the new one with the Fey world with that has a circus on the cover. Because people not everybody's into the swords and sorcery thing, the Tolkien thing. Some people want to have the steampunk character.
Yeah. And
before they couldn't, now you tell them, well, now you can. Or some people, I play with a friend. I don't mean to take up too much time, but I play with a friend and his two kids, and the girl, 17, his daughter, she's 17. She's really into like anime, so she's got like these like Pokemon type of characters.
Oh.
I'm DMI allow, so I'm like, that's what you want to do. We'll just figure out like how to base the rules around that. There's some you have to put some limitations on it because it is a game, so we can't have your character do everything, But totally. I was totally they'll continue to do that in the future too. They'll make it as accessible as they possibly can. A lot of games are doing that.
Hmm. I think that humans as just a society, humans in general can take a lesson, take a page out of this book, because like I think just from the bigger, broader perspective of the world, people are starting to recognize now life, everything in general is better when we all are just opening and welcoming to each other. And I feel like society is going through a big transition right now where we are now just like everything is starting to open up more. And like not in terms of the pandemic, but I mean in terms of like social divisions and social divides. And, you know, people are starting to become allies for people in other groups and, you know, starting to form friendships and form bridges across societal divides in a way that can take big gaps and slowly start to close them, perhaps over the course of decades, generations, but slowly and surely. And so if we look at the way that D&D has taken away these limitations and has allowed more and more openness, then my question is, how do we do the same thing in society? And how do we get people to open up more to different types of people and to take away some of that fear that divides us?
Well, kids who are learning, who are playing the game now as it is, I think that would influence them to try to take that into the real world.
Yeah.
But the game does help. Just as the game is being used to get through to autistic kids, I think the openness and, you know, non-limitations they're putting on things nowadays would, you know, would definitely influence a kid like 13, 14, like, hey, if I can do this in the gaming session with my friends, why can't I be that way in the classroom with people who are different than me? Could be a major influence.
Oh yeah. I also really was interested in playing a clip where Drake the Rake, while inebriated, mind you, gives an amazing pep talk to Rand. And in this moment, Rand was a little nervous, you know, and Rand was thinking about the idea of adventuring, but saying like, oh, I couldn't do that. You know, I have to stay here, tend to the farm. And so Drake kind of addresses that limiting mindset that holds Rand back through fear. So if we can get clip number 5.
Help but over here, Rand, that you're having this problem of whether or not you should go and adventure.
Well, I've always wanted to see the outside world, you know.
Let me tell you this. You're 17. I'm 66. Do you want to grow up like me, raking things all day and not seeing the world and following the guy like you know who? Is that what you want?
Well, I figured I'd just take over my dad's
Didn't
farm.
think so.
Okay.
Get out.
I love this so much.
Oh boy, Drake, some motivational speech. So, first of all, I thought that was hilarious. And second, I wanted to bring it up because I feel like you're speaking directly to fear here. And it's like for me, and maybe like it resonates differently with everyone, but for me, a big part of the message that Drake of House Rake was sending was, you know, like, yes, there is the fear. The fear is there. Oh, new things, change, it seems a lot. But take that fear and don't let it stop you. You know, feel it, sure, but still go live the dream. And that's what I was hearing.
Oh, I was hearing Drake of the Rakes doing some serious projecting on the poor little Rand.
That's so funny. Oh God, it's great. Both are true. Talking to fear and then like projecting to Rand. It's true. I mean, it's great.
Yeah. Maybe
have no words.
maybe it's another example of giving the advice that you need to hear for yourself.
Yeah.
Well, if Drake were a therapist, that would be some serious countertransference right there on Rand the client.
Oh boy.
It's just all bad, man. It's all bad. Leave it alone.
And right along with that, there was actually a very sweet moment where Nifty does the same and also speaks to the fear in Rand, but takes a slightly different approach. So, clip 5A, please.
Caesar could be great additions to your team.
I just
I
got
can-
spit out like, adventure? What are you talking about, adventure? I got chores to do. I can't go adventuring. My dad would kill me.
This could be your chance, Rand, to get out of this town.
I'll go and get another drink. And I'll come and sit back down and like stare at her like, what are you talking about? Like, shut up. Just don't talk that way.
But
I think this is the difference between a friend and someone who's drunk.
so true.
Advice. The difference of advice.
Yes, that's
Well, the
true.
manipulations were the same.
Yeah.
You had one angry person. You had one like, come on, man. Come on.
Yeah.
Get out that door.
You know you want to.
You know you want to do it. Manipulate much? Hey, let's go. Let's go.
So that was definitely nifty, like appealing to what she knows Rand wants. Rand wants to get out. Rand wants to have adventures, but at the same time, he's like, oh no, all the realities of what adventure actually means is like way too much and overwhelming. So sort of like playing the balance between those two. I think that was great.
For sure. And I liked how,
Get out of that town.
I mean, speaking to that, I feel like Nifty was helping Rand to remember what he had said earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when in the moment, Rand was like, oh, I'm kind of paralyzed by my fear. And Nifty said, oh, but Rand, you told me this before, remember?
Mm-hmm.
And
His
so,
friends mean well. So you know what, Rand? Get off your butt. Your pitchfork, whatever you want to use as a weapon, get out there.
yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, there's this dichotomy of like drunk and extremely invigorating support from Drake. Then there's like the gentle, like sweet, like, hey, like remember you got this, like from Nifty.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think it's also really important for people to remember, and like at this point, I feel like we all know, if not us, then we know somebody who is struggling with their mental health in life in general. And if you find yourself in this situation where somebody that you know is struggling, you don't necessarily have to talk to them about the struggle in order to show that you are supporting them. Sometimes when people are going through a rough time, they don't always want to talk about what the rough time is, but they might just want someone to just be there and to show that, hey, we don't have to talk about it, but I do care about your general well-being. So I thought a really great example of this was in a little mini interaction that happened between Caesar and Rand right at the end of the episode. Clip number 6, please.
Steve had the thing with Morgan go.
Well, you were there.
I'm just thinking
didn't
about
see?
how you feel about it, you know.
Oh, I'm just wondering what I could get her in Waterdeep. Maybe like a necklace or something. I thought I pulled out my 2 gold pieces. Like, this is enough, right?
Maybe. I don't know what inflation's like in Waterdeep.
In what?
It's a whole thing.
Inflation's
You know,
crazy, man.
I actually wanted to point out something here with how Caesar talks to Rand, how Drake talks to Rand versus how Nifty talks to Rand. It could be a gender thing, just because Rand is male and it's male talking to a male. Like they sound like more blunt and more like, hey man, come on, like go out there, or hey man, how did it go with your girl? Versus Nifty takes a more traditionally female approach of
A
there's a
maternalistic approach.
yeah, more
Ah.
maternalistic approach. So it could just be the gender
And
part.
also
of
because
it.
he's like, he's the youngest.
Mhm.
I'm
yeah, that's
thinking that
true.
he's like barely 17. Maybe like a month prior he was 16.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he needs some guidance. He needs good talking to, as they would say.
And everyone around him does talk to him.
That's
It's
right.
just the approach is just different
Yeah.
based on their
Wow.
gender, based on
Mhm.
how old they are, in relation to Rand, etc.
Absolutely. And just like there are so many different people talking to Rand, and just like there are so many states of being from which we can respond to people who are trying to help us, just like as a PSA to people out there, if you know somebody who is struggling, and like if they've expressed anything to you, please don't be too scared about like, oh, I want to help, but what if I'm helping in the wrong way? Like I want to support, but what if what I'm doing is wrong? I think a lot of the time just making it known that you are there as support, just that intention in itself means so much for people who are in a space of struggle. And so if you find yourself worried, if you find yourself like nervous about how to show support, I think first just let them know that you are there to support them. So many people talk to Rand in all types of different ways, and at the end of the day, the central message was the same. Drake, Nifty, and Caesar all were communicating to Rand, hey, Rand, we're here with you. You're one of us. You okay? We want what's best for
And he
you, man.
appreciates all that.
And he appreciates all that, even though they all communicated it in different ways. So I think that just show support and remind the people who you love that you love them. It means the world. Yeah.
I was going to say the where we left off with the cliffhanger getting, obviously this goblin is going to attack us.
Mm-hmm.
He's not listening to reason. So we're going to have to learn teamwork pretty quick in order to help each other out, defend each other.
Oh,
None
yeah.
of us have been in this situation before. I'm sorry, Rand has never spilled blood. Aside from some schoolboy scuffles in like the hayfield, he's never drawn a weapon on another creature. I'm assuming that Nifty and Caesar haven't, so we're gonna have to develop teamwork, or else this goblin could, kill all of us.
Yeah.
And that's one part of adventuring when you get out there, because you're only no talking if like you're getting attacked by a group of kobolds or goblins or orcs with ill intent. It's like you're gonna have to fight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and no matter what trauma you are working through on your own, whatever
all that goes out the window.
Whatever you're processing,
your teamwork has to come into play.
Yeah,
and
when you're in combat, you're in combat.
Yeah, and then afterwards you'll deal with whatever there is to deal with. Which there would be trauma afterwards, especially for somebody. Say Rand was the one. Say we defeat the goblin, and Rand's the one who delivers the killing blow. Mm-hmm. How's that going to make him feel? Maybe that's something that one of the adventurers could have told him sitting by the fireside with their grogs of ale. Like, you ever kill, boy? You ever spill blood, boy? No, sir. Yeah, you're gonna have to learn. So yes, it's part of it.
How does your own trauma come into play when you have to deal with the world in real time while processing what you've previously been through?
How do you deal with the fact that this is what I have to do? If I want to go into this way of life, I will have to do this over and over and over again. How do I stay grounded? without ending up like those poor guys,
Wow.
those poor adventurers. Or is there no hope? Will I end up this way, jaded? I'll have my scars because, we're constantly fighting. But anyway, that's why I thought about, is teamwork. They're going to have to learn some teamwork, like on the fly immediately, because this crazy goblin's coming for them. And, unless they run away, which is another possibility, but he might follow and attack in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
That leads to a whole other series of, a whole other thought process. What's going to happen after that combat?
Yeah. Sounds like we have a lot of opportunities to, see what happens and then take those lessons and apply them to real life. A lot of this sounds like really important life lessons.
Yeah.
Learning how to work as a team, learning how to operate through your trauma, learning how to live with it and still do the things that you need to do.
Well, that's why we're doing
learning how
this.
to thrive instead of survive.
Yeah. That's why we're doing this, just exploring all the ways that D&D can relate to mental health issues, positive mental health and well-being and whatnot. So, yeah.
Amen. Ugh, you guys, this has been so amazing. Thank you so much for being here. I feel like this is a pretty decent place to wrap up our conversation about Play Episode 1. Does anyone have any last words or any last thing they want to say about Play Episode 1 before we wrap up?
Go watch it.
Go watch it. Michelle's an awesome DM.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. It's my first time, please. But I'm doing my best. Thank you, fam. And I'm excited to see where we're at season 4, Probably look back at Play Episode 1 and be like, why am I like this? All right. Well then, on that note, it's been wonderful. Thank you again for your presence. Thank you for bringing all of your beautiful thoughts. And also, thank you so much to our amazing producer behind the stage. Thank you, Dru, for, doing all this wizardry with the videos and the screens and everything.
Nice.
Yes.
Wow.
Welcome to Dungeons and Wellness, everyone. So, on that note, that wraps up our first Clarity episode. Thank you again for being here to all of you in person, and thank you to all of the future viewers for being part of our Dungeons and Wellness fam. We'll see you next time for Play Episode 2.